Okay, guys, this video is gonna be kind of scary, and this is gonna showing me
Simon Whistler,
some
you're watching
creepy
Top 10
TV
and in the video
shows.
today, we're looking at the top 10 creepy children's TV shows.
Number 10, Boobar. The best way to describe this show, believe it or not, is that it consists entirely of multicolored creatures with anime eyes dancing and floating around in a hyperbaric nightmare dimension full of psychedelic rainbows and sparkles. Any child who doesn't nervously walk back from the television mouthing, will no doubt suffer an epileptic seizure soon enough.
But they're creepy.
The show does an admirable job of combining the drug-fueled cacophony of the 70s with inherently scary doll heads and warped alien bodies. There's no story, no sets, no writing, and no voices save for an annoying child who screams Boobar every few minutes. And yet, it's difficult to imagine that anything would cause children watching to question the purpose of their little worlds more. There is nothing creepier and more unsettling than the wanton destruction of one's own sanity, let alone a child's. Number 9, Peppermint Park. Peppermint Park was pretty much the epitome of the art of creepy puppets. Lifeless rolling eyes, rigid plastic bodies, and cloth human hands, as well as voices that sound like they were recorded in an insane asylum, all culminate in a perfect storm of childhood trauma. The show featured a couple of different sets of puppets, one of which was a perverse rip-off of Bert and Ernie, if Bert and Ernie suddenly devolved into autistic ape-men, while the other set were a couple of semi-lobotomized dragons, or dinosaurs with voices even more odd than the human puppets, which is saying something. The show was bargain basement stuff, and it looked it, complete with filthy curtains that flanked the dank cellar window, creepy stock footage of random children playing in a playground, and completely pointless Dixieland performances. All the show was lacking was an unpainted van lurking around. Number 8, JJ the Jet Plane. Something about putting oddly shaped, realistic faces on airplanes and helicopters is very unsettling, especially considering that in the show these creatures are completely sentient with minds of their own. It begs the question, in this universe where airplanes are alive, do people ride in them? Are they enslaved to serve man, or just another species of animal? How are new planes born? Anyway, where Thomas the Tank Engine succeeds in placing a face on an otherwise inanimate object without making kids nervous, JJ does not. The face dominates the planes they are stuck onto, having bulbously inflated features that are strangely rigid. In fact, the only parts that move are the eyes, barely, and the eyelids. Yes, there are eyelids on these planes. There's a bunch of other weird imagery that pops up every now and again, like naked cartoon monkeys and virtually featherless rubbery human characters, but it's the airplanes themselves that really take the horror of the uncanny valley and bludgeon our children with it. Number 7, Rupert the Bear. Starting the tradition of disturbing TV shows designed to freak out many a British child, The Adventures of Rupert Bear was born in the decade few of us want to remember, the 70s. Those who have good memories of this show probably only remember the animated version that came later, which was relatively harmless, and most likely they aren't aware of the marionette version which came before. Marionettes are creepy enough by themselves, but when they come in strange shapes vaguely resembling anthropomorphic animals
I watch episodes of that show on YouTube, I'm not gonna lie, but that looks creepy. Like the animated version.
Besides Rupert, there were a myriad of odd-looking characters in the show, including a deformed sheep, a floating fireball with legs, and, most notorious of all, Raggedy, who looked like a gnarled and haunted tree branch crossed with a snork. Research has shown that many a British nightmare in the early 1970s was centered on Raggedy. Reportedly, all of the episodes were lost in a fire, and I like to think this is God's way of expunging the earth from the unholiness that was Rupert. Number 6, Pipkins. Pipkins was another British TV show in the 70s that featured, you guessed it, puppets. Puppets aren't inherently scary and can be used to great effect on shows like Sesame Street and Lamb Chop's Play Along when operated correctly and made with love. You can't just find a ratty piece of carpet, shove your hand into its arse and call it good children's fare. Well, Pipkins did just that, which led to a rich cast of misfit puppets with regional accents that no one wanted to love. Most famous of the bunch was the character of Hardly Hair. He is one of the skankiest, dirtiest, spazziest puppets to ever appear on kids' TV. Not only did he look like a deceased pet that was dug up and brought back to life after being dead for 3 weeks, but his repertoire consists mostly of snide comments and innuendos. You know, for kids. Number 5, Dirt Girl World. Dirt Girl World is a relatively new show and is about a girl who loves to go outside and get dirty. Not a bad idea, but there's something
That's
wrong
ugly.
with this girl though. She can't decide whether she is a human or a badly animated cartoon. She has a huge cartoon head and a barely perceptible nose, but real human eyes and a real human mouth, which all top a disproportionately tiny and childlike body. Even worse, the eyes seem to move independently of each other, and with her mouth flying all over her face, Dirt Girl constantly makes some very disturbing facial expressions. It's as if Jessica Rabbit hooked up with Eddie Valiant instead of Roger Rabbit, and this girl was
Listen,
their
no.
half-human, half-cartoon love child. Alongside her is a male equivalent who is just as messed up, a yellow worm thing with Super Dave Osborne's face, and a human cricket hybrid abomination that wears a short bus helmet as if to telegraph the reason to everyone why insects and humans shouldn't mate. What's wrong with just using humans or cartoons? Stop trying to combine them. It's weird. Number 4, Terrorhawks. This show itself isn't too bad, despite prominently featuring marionettes, otherwise known as the Devil's Toy, which are usually creepy enough in their own right. What puts Terrorhawks on this list, though, is the character
Okay,
of
this
Zelda,
is
who
gonna
is
be
probably
pretty
the
long.
scariest
I'm gonna have
looking
to end it
villain to
here, and
ever
I'll do a
appear in
part
kids'
2.
show, and an
Bye,
equally frightening
guys.
henchman. Zelda
See you
is
in the
scary
next
on a real level,
video.
though she looks like a mentally unstable grandmother wearing